Erev Tov, good evening, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Chag Sameach. We
Chag
rejoice in this season of rejoicing, this Shabbat, this festival of Sukkot. We come together to celebrate Shabbat and make joyful noise with each other. We come to learn and hear words of Torah from our speaker this evening, Sarah McBride. And we come to honor the holiday as well as Shabbat. At Sukkot, we study Ecclesiastes, which is a mouthful. And so with those words in mind, we turn to page 360. Page 360 as we sing words from Ecclesiastes. We join together in song.
Everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap. A time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather souls together. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace, a time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. Last time. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rent, a time to sow, a time to love, a time of hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven.
On this Shabbat, we pray for light, for enlightenment. On this holiday of Sukkot, Zman Simchatenu, we celebrate with joy and teach ourselves how to bring more joy into this world. And as we think about joy and light, I invite Alex Hughes, our board member, our chair of our youth committee, to join us and to kindle our Sabbath lights. And we turn to page 2 and 3, and whether physically or spiritually, we rise.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offering of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kichanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the lights of Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We remain standing as we turn to page 20. We welcome Shabbat like a bride, like a queen, as we join in singing Lecha Dodi, verses 1, 5, and 9, remembering to turn and greet the Sabbath bride on the last verse. Page 20, as we join in Lecha Dodi.
La 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 Lecha Dodi, la 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 Likrat Kabbalat, la 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 Pnei Shabbat, Pnei Shabbat Nekabel, la 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 Lecha Dodi, la 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 Likrat Kabbalat, la 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 Pnei Shabbat, Pnei Shabbat Nekabela. Shamor v'zachor v'dibor echai ishmiyanu el ha'yuchai Adonai echai u'shmo echai l'shemo tiferet v'likhilah lai 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 la 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 Lecha Dodi, la 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 Likrat Kabbalat, la 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 Pnei Shabbat, Pnei Shabbat Nekabela. Likrat Kabbalat, la 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 Pnei Shabbat, Pnei Shabbat Nekabela. Oi v'shalom, Ateret Bala, Gam besimcha.
Page 146, our call to worship, the Baruch Hu. 146.
Yada lai lai lai, 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 yada lai lai lai. Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Do you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam va'ed, Le'olam va'ed. Yada lai lai lai, 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 yada lai lai lai.
We turn to page 149. We still all the noise. We listen for the still small voice within ourselves. We listen for God's voice as we recite the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam va'ed. We may be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen.
We think of the freedom that we have for ourselves. We think about the freedom that each of us yearns for ourselves, and that freedom that we can help to build others. As we thank God for the freedom that exists, we think also how we can bring more freedom to this world. Mi Chamocha, page 152.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef eleh, nora tehilot osef eleh, malchutecha ra'u vanecha, בוקי הים לפני משה ומרים, זה לי אנו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
On every night, but especially this night, we pray for God's sukkah, God's shelter of peace, to settle over all of us, over this world, over the land of Israel, over all those in need. Bottom of 153.
Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukkot shalom, shalom aleinu ועל כל עמו ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני הפורש סוכת שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל. ועל ירושלים וכל עמו, ועל ירושלים שלום, ועל ירושלים ועל כל עמו, ועל ירושלים שלום. ברוך אתה אדוני הפורש סוכת שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל, שלום עלינו ועל כל בשבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם. ושמעו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל עוד היא לעולם, עוד היא לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם. כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות הברית עולם.
Page 155, physically or spiritually, we rise for the Amidah.
Na 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 Adonai. Na 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 sfatai tiftach. Na 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 ufi agi tehilatecha. Na 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 Adonai. Na 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 sfatai tiftach. Na 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 ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, Adonai, sfatai tiftach. Adonai, ufi agi tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanorah, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
We can be seated. We turn in our prayer books to page 253, to the middle of the page. We think of those in our community who are in need of healing, the healing of body, the healing of spirit. If you are thinking of someone who's in need of healing, someone in your own inner circle, I want you to hold on to their name, say that name quietly to yourself. Think of that person or those individuals who are in need of that healing as we join together in our prayer of healing as a community of healing. Page 253.
Of strength, who bless thou once before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. words, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Spread over us the shelter of peace. The words can be found on page 360.
Let's rise now together for Kiddush. And we call Alex Hughes back up onto the bima to lead us in the English of that blessing. Alex is the chair of our youth committee, which includes not only Bestie and Junior Bestie, our NIFTY affiliates, but also our other younger youth groups, family programming, and all of that wonderful programming that takes place just outside of the purview of religious school. If there are any kids in the congregation who would like to join us up on the bima who have not yet celebrated bar mitzvah, you're welcome to join us up on the bima as well. And I see a few people whose bar and bat mitzvah are upcoming. So welcome to come on up.
Especially the gentleman who's bar mitzvah.
This is your last shot, guys. Yeah, there we go. All right. After Kiddush, we'll remain standing for birthday blessings.
Let us praise God with this symbol of joy and give thanks for the blessings of the past week, for life and strength, for home and love and friendship, for the discipline of our trials and temptation, for the happiness that has come to us out of our labors. You have ennobled us, O God, by the blessings of work, and in love have sanctified us by Sabbath rest and worship as ordained in the Torah. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to be hallowed unto the eternal your God.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinechilanu zikaron lema'aseh bereishit ki hu yom tehila lemikrai kodesh zeker Litziat Mitzrayim
Kivanu v'charta v'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha v'ahava uvratzon hinachaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen. L'chaim. L'chaim. Let's stretch our hands out over our children, whether they're on the bima or maybe a little closer than that, and say over them, may God bless you.
May God bless you
And protect you.
and protect you.
May God's light
May God's light
shine in you
shine in you
and inspire you.
inspire you.
May God's countenance
May God's countenance
ever be turned toward you
ever be turned toward you
and bless you
and bless you
with shalom,
with shalom,
with peace.
with peace.
Amen.
Amen.
Don't sit down. Are you celebrating a birthday this month? Then you should be on the bima. Any birthday at all. I'm not asking which one. September birthday, October birthday, October birthday. Who else we got? October birthdays. What's that? Monday is your birthday. And yours.
You're twins. Really? Happy birthday.
Nice. Come close, come close, come close, come close. As we said at the beginning of our service, Sukkot is Zman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing. And a birthday should be a time of rejoicing. It should be a time to remember how much joy you brought to those who love you when you first came into this world, and how much joy you continue to bring to those who are close to you, even today. How much joy there is in the world when you get to look back on the past year at all you have accomplished and look forward in the coming year to all the blessings that will come. We are reminded by Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, the day you were born is the day that God decided the world could not exist without you. And so we rejoice that you came into this world and that you celebrate your birthday in this season of our joy. We join together in our prayer of joy and gratitude. Let's all join together in Shehechianu. Baruch atah Adonai haporei.
Sorry, whoops.
Cantor wants it still to be Yom Kippur. It's okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. And happy birthday, 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 and happy birthday. We remain standing as we turn back to our prayer books to page 282. Page 282, Aleinu l'shabeach, as our birthday folk return to their families.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עוונם, ואנחנו פורים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
We may be seated. Even at this season of joy, we are mindful of those whose joy is muted because they are in mourning, because they are remembering someone who died at this season in years past. I ask, if you are in the first 30 days of your mourning, if your mourning is near to you in time, to rise at this time. If you're remembering someone who was taken from you in the last 30 days. And if you're remembering someone who was taken from you in the last year, I invite you to rise at this time. And if on this Shabbat you observe a yard site, the anniversary of a loved one's passing, I invite you to rise. And I ask, if it is your custom to rise, to remember those whom only we can remember, I invite you to do so. As we turn to page 294, and we join together. Yet al viet kadash shemei rabbah, bi'alma yivrach te v'yamliach malchute, b'chayechon uvyomechon, uv'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'gala uv'yizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe shemei rabbah mevarach le'olam olam me'almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudusha barichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shalama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, v'yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. We remember Stuart Kamen, Jill Strauss, Janet Bender, Belima Brill, Edwina Buden, Pearl Kramer, Rose Elias, Evelyn Grossman, Rose Herman, Claire Carton, Claire Kaufman, Tilly Kurtz, Irving Kurtz, Oscar Pindus, Sarah Pindus, Elise Surfer Polikoff, Rosalie Sapp, Sarah Schnittman, Sylvia Shapiro, Rebecca Steinberg, Lawrence Trachtman, Theodore Tuckerman, Pauline Zinn, and Rabbi Marcus Burstein. We also add the name of Alexander Missildine, who died serving his country this past week. And I would ask, if you are a guest in this congregation and have a name to add, feel free to do so as my eyes meet yours. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be a blessing, as we say, amen. Please be seated. With thanks to our song leader, Reese Ratliff, for leading us and proving something I already knew from his song leading at camp, that he doesn't need all 6 strings. Then why bother? We're going to conclude our service as we began at Joining Together in Song on page 360, back with the song that we opened, and then we will continue with our opportunity to hear from Sarah McBride. Page 360, you can remain in your seats.
Just the last verse. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rent, a time to sow, a time of love, a time of hate, a time of peace. I swear it's not too late. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So we're going to transition now. It is a joy to be able to have Sarah here with us this evening. I want to first call up Sonia Sloan, without whom this would not have been possible. Sonia has been meeting with a group of women here in the congregation, both members of the congregation and also people from outside, Jews and non-Jews, since the election last year on a subject that Sonia knows very well, which is how to make a difference in this world. So I'm going to ask Sonia to say a word or two, and I'm going to offer her a microphone. So we're going to stand. Pretend she's taller than me for a minute.
How do I do this? Just talking to you. Thank you very much. I asked the rabbi if I could say a couple of words, and it will be just a couple. I have known Sarah since age 15 when we worked on Beau Biden's first campaigns, and then Markel's. I knew then that this was an absolutely extraordinary individual, and I cannot tell you how proud I personally am, and all of us are, for what Sarah has accomplished. She will tell you more than I can begin to tell you, but thank you, Sarah. I just love you. You're wonderful.
Thank you, Sonia. As Reformed Jews, we believe in egalitarianism, which sounds like such a cold word. We believe that everyone is made in God's image. We believe, as Rabbi Capel said at Yom Kippur, quoting from Rabbi Michael Latz, our colleague, that God doesn't make mistakes, and that each person comes into this world with a gift to share, and that it is our job to lift those people up and to make sure that they know that they are loved, that they are cherished, that they are valued, and that they are created b'tselem Elohim, in God's image. Sarah McBride, I could talk about her political achievements that we already know. I could talk about the work that she does with the Human Rights Campaign. I could talk about all that she has done in this state and beyond. But I would make the argument that the most important thing that she does in her advocacy is she stands up and exists as a role model. And she, by her advocacy, by her taking a stand each and every day, teaches all of us and reminds all of us how important it is to cherish the people around us and to remember that they are all in God's image and that they are all perfect. So I'm going to call Sarah up to share her wisdom and her Torah with us. When she's done speaking, we'll have a chance to do a little bit of Q&A at that point. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. If you turn. Oh, you're good.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
It is wonderful to be here. Thank you so much to Sunny for inviting me and Rabbi for those beautiful words. My name is Sarah McBride. I'm the National Press Secretary at the Human Rights Campaign, which is the nation's largest LGBTQ civil rights organization. I'm also a native of Wilmington, Delaware, a proud graduate of Cab Calloway School of the Arts. Go Cab. I'm a graduate of American University. I'm a policy wonk, politics nerd, a sister, and a daughter. It took me 21 years to muster up the courage to say those last two words, sister and daughter. Today, they are among my proudest identities, and tonight I can stand before you as the person that I am. But I have to admit that it hasn't always been that way. I remember as a child, in my earliest memories, lying in bed at night praying that I would wake up the next day and be myself, that I could still dream big dreams, and that I could still have my family be proud of me. From my earliest memories, I always knew who I was. It wasn't that I knew I was different. I knew I was a girl. But I also knew that society expected me to play a different role, that the expectations of others created shackles that kept me inside of myself. I first learned about the word transgender when I was about 10 years old. I was watching a sitcom in 2000, when a guest character came on. And the guest character was this beautiful woman, and it was explained over the course of the episode that she was transgender, that she had been assigned a different sex than the gender with which she identified. And in the split second after finding that out, I convinced myself that this was only possible in television. And I turned to my mother and I asked her, "Is that real? Are there people like that?" And she responded nonchalantly, "Yes, they're called transgender or something like that." And I remember in that moment feeling so much hope that there were other people like me, but also feeling my heart sink as I looked at my mom and realized, I'm going to have to tell you this someday, and you are going to be so disappointed. The guest character, every time another character on the television show would find her attractive, the laugh track would cue. And at 10 years old, I didn't know a lot, but I knew that I didn't want to be a joke. And so I kept it inside. I told myself that if I could make it worthwhile for other people for me to stay in the closet by making a difference in the world, by making my family proud, that those things would somehow bring me the wholeness and completeness that certainly wasn't present. And growing up, it felt like my dreams and my identity were mutually exclusive. I'd look in the mirror and I'd struggle to say just 2 words: I'm transgender. And the moment that I would say those words, shame would fill me. And I denied. I'd go, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. But eventually, the pain, the incompleteness became too much. I think it's difficult for folks who aren't transgender, cisgender, to understand what it feels like to have a gender identity that differs from your sex assigned at birth. I think this is one of the challenges that we have in this movement, is to build empathy when folks might not have an analogous experience. And for me, the best I can describe it is a constant feeling of homesickness. That unwavering ache in the pit of my stomach that would only go away when I could be seen as myself. And while homesickness for most people with geography and location, it dissipates with time, that homesickness only grew with distance and with time. In my sophomore year in college at American University, I was elected president of the student body. At the same time, my internal struggle with my gender identity was coming to a head. And it was actually on Christmas Eve, sitting in Westminster Presbyterian Church just down the road, when looking up at the stained glass and listening to the beautiful choir sing, that I knew that I couldn't spend one more day living in the shadows, living in the closet, and hiding who I am. I couldn't spend one more day living a life that didn't truly feel like mine. And so on Christmas Day, I came out to my parents. There's not much to do after you open presents. And while my parents struggled with the news, they made very clear that they loved me and accepted me as the daughter that I am. So with the courage that my parents and so many friends, including Sally Berger, who's here tonight, and her son Harry, with the courage that they gave me in May of 2012 during the last day of my term as president of the AU student body, I came out in an op-ed in the AU student newspaper. And I have to say, while I was nervous about the reaction from the campus community, all I got was support. One student actually said that the joy on that campus and on that evening in 2012 felt like we had just won a sports championship. I don't know how they would know that, because AU doesn't really win sports championships. But it was an incredible thing to witness, because this was before 2013, what Time magazine called the transgender tipping point. It was before Transparent and Laverne Cox. It was before Caitlyn Jenner, God help us. And what AU did on that evening is it demonstrated that while we may still be learning about trans identities, this is how you react when a person tells you who they are, with love, with affirmation, with respect, with the dignity that every person is born with. But it was also clear to me that the privileges that I had, a supportive family, a supportive campus, those weren't necessarily the realities for far too many people on AU's campus and far too many people across the United States and around the world. Oftentimes, our advancements and our progress only reinforce the gap, the divide between those with luck and privilege and those still rejected by their families, or facing violence merely for walking down the street as the person that they are. But it doesn't have to be that way. And so after I came out, what was the hardest thing for me up until that point in my life, but still relatively easy compared to most others, I committed myself to trying to make the privileges that I had a reality for everyone, so that everyone could be accepted by their family. Everyone could still live their truths and dream big dreams, that they could be safe from violence. So I came back to Delaware. At the time, Delaware had no statewide laws protecting transgender people from discrimination. It was still legal to deny someone housing because they were transgender. It was still legal to kick someone out of a restaurant simply because they were transgender. It was still legal to fire someone from their job. And so working with Equality Delaware after joining its board, we worked with the state legislature, with people like Deb Heffernan, who are here tonight, to make sure that Delaware ensured the equal protection of the laws to all of its residents. And it was actually a big year, 2013, because Delaware became the only state in the nation to pass both marriage equality and non-discrimination protections in the exact same legislative session within a matter of weeks. No other state has been able to do that. And it happened not because of money, not because of potential votes in the next election, but because day in and day out we went down to the legislature, myself, my family, my parents, and other transgender people from across the state, and we told our stories. We demonstrated to the legislators that behind this national conversation on transgender rights are real people who love and laugh, hope and fear, cry and dream just like everyone else, that we hurt when we're mocked, that we hurt when we're discriminated against, and that we just want to be treated with dignity and fairness. And so Delaware passed both marriage equality and gender identity non-discrimination protections. And to sort of encapsulate the rapid rate of change that we've seen here in Delaware, in 2009, it was still legal to fire someone not just for being transgender, but also for being gay. There was no relationship recognition in this state. But in a matter of 5 years, because of the goodness not just of the LGBTQ community speaking out, but because of allies in the legislature and so many people in this room telling their stories and standing up for one another, we moved from a state with no legal equality to a state at the forefront of the LGBTQ equality movement. Jack Markell, who was governor at the time, is one of and will forever be one of only 3 governors to have their signature on all 3 major pillars of the LGBTQ agenda: sexual orientation non-discrimination protections, gender identity non-discrimination protections, and marriage equality. And that's because of that rapid rate of change. Now, of course, there's still a ton of work to do here in Delaware. LGBTQ students still face bullying and harassment and even discrimination in their schools. So-called conversion therapy, which every single major medical association has decried as child abuse, is still legal in this state against minors. And we're still continuing to work to push back and to push equality forward. And Deb Heffernan, who I mentioned earlier, is leading on both of those fronts. So actually, if you don't mind giving her a round of applause for her leadership. But what was also clear to me was that the privileges that we had in Delaware, the rights that we had been able to gain, were not a reality in most states across this country. At the time, and still to this day, a majority of states still lack clear and comprehensive protections from discrimination for LGBTQ people throughout daily life. Violence remains a terrible problem. This past year, over 130 anti-LGBTQ bills were introduced in 30 states across the country. So I decided that I wanted to go back to DC for a little while to work with the broader movement to make sure that we could bring the change we saw in Delaware to the nation. And not to get a little bit too serious, but for me, in this fight, I come to it not just as someone who is transgender, but also as someone who's loved someone who's transgender. I met my future husband, Andy, fighting for equality in 2012, and we fell in love. I had admired his extraordinary advocacy and marveled at his courage, his optimism, and his humor. Shortly after we started dating, Andy was diagnosed with cancer. He went through treatment, radiation, chemo, and surgery. Eventually, he got a clean bill of health. But then, a couple months later, Andy found out the news that every patient fears, that his cancer was back it had spread, and for him, it was terminal. After he found out that he didn't have much time left, Andy asked me to marry him. Of course, the answer was yes. 3 weeks after his re-diagnosis of cancer, we married on the rooftop of our apartment building in Washington, D.C., before friends and family. And then 4 days after we wed, as I held his hand and our brand new wedding bands touched, he passed away. And I share that story, that experience, because knowing and loving Andy left me profoundly changed. He was a transgender man, an advocate in his own right. And he taught me how to love and be loved. He taught me how to live the values I fight for at work in my own life. But more than anything else, my relationship with Andy underscored for me that change cannot come fast enough. That every day matters when it comes to building a world where every single person can live their life to the fullest. Andy came out as transgender in college. He came out relatively young. He was supposed to have 3/4 of his life as his authentic self. But because of circumstances out of his control, he had less than a quarter. And some people have even less time than that. Every day we wake up and we have the choice as to whether we will love or hate, whether we will build bridges or build walls. And every day we choose to put up barriers to any person's pursuit of happiness. We are robbing them of the greatest gift that God has ever given us, the gift of life. Dr. King called that urgency the fierce urgency of now. And we must feel it not just on this issue, but on every issue we face as a country. Because this is no ordinary time. And we find ourselves, our country, and our community at a moment of choosing. We must decide whether we will be a nation that says there is only one way to love, only one way to look, and only one way to live, or whether we will be a nation where everyone has the freedom to live openly and equally. And right now in this fight, it's not just the children of this nation who are watching, it's also posterity. It's also the countless generations for whom this moment, this time right now, is a chapter in their history books of tomorrow. And while every chapter may be influenced by whoever is president, we know that in the end, every chapter is written by the people. Every chapter is written by the choices that we make every single day, either to remain silent in the face of prejudice or persecution, or whether to stand up, whether to speak out, and whether we bend that arc of the moral universe just a little bit more towards justice. Over the last year, we have seen unprecedented attacks on so many marginalized communities within this country. Over the last year, we've seen this administration rescind life-saving guidance promoting the protection of transgender students. Just 2 days after Jeff Sessions became Attorney General, he targeted transgender kids, 7, 8, 9 years old, to bullying and harassment during the school day. We've seen this administration declare that LGBTQ workers are not protected under federal civil rights laws. We've seen this president in a series of erratic tweets. All of his tweets are erratic, but in a series of erratic tweets, ban transgender people who have been proudly serving this country and doing so openly for the last year from serving anymore. We have seen attack after attack after attack. But we've also seen that no presidency, no election can change our worth or diminish the power of our voices. And in this fight, we cannot just limit the movement for LGBTQ equality to issues specific to sexual orientation or gender identity. Because the LGBTQ community is as diverse as the fabric of this nation. We are women, we are Jewish, we are Muslim, we are Black, Latino, Asian, and Native American, we are immigrants, and we are people with disabilities. And so when any politician attacks any single one of us, they need to hear from every single one of us. And that's why we will never stand by the Human Rights Campaign or the LGBTQ community or any of us as allies when any politician tries to rip healthcare away from millions of Americans. It's why we can't stand by when this administration tries to deport hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants living in America today, or ban people from majority Muslim nations from entering this country. It's why we can't stand by when this president calls neo-Nazis and white supremacists fine people. It's why we must speak out every time there is hate, every time there is injustice. I know right now it feels like we're almost lost as a country, that our politics is so broken that we can no longer do big things. But I will say that if there is one thing I have learned since coming out 5 years ago, it is that change is still possible. Change is still possible. Time and time again, we have seen that. I see it in my own job at HRC. I see it traveling around the country, meeting young transgender kids, sometimes 7, 8, 9 years old, who are living their truth. Young kids like Max, Maryland, and Libby, who I watch march into the Texas state capitol with their heads held high to demand dignity and fairness, holding in one hand the knowledge of all of the hate that exists in this world, but in the other hand, the knowledge that their lives are worthy and their identities should be celebrated. I see that change is possible in the 7-year-old named Lulu, who when I met her, her first question to me was so filled with pride that it would not have made sense to that shame-filled 10-year-old self. She asked me simply, "What's my favorite part about being transgender?" I see that change is possible in the 11-year-old transgender girl named Stella, who when I met her and I asked her what she wants to be when she grows up, she declared without hesitation the first transgender president. What once seemed impossible, that we could live our truth and dream big dreams at the same time, is now very real to Stella. The mere fact that kids like Stella and Lulu exist today demonstrate how far we've come. For we've transformed impossibility into possibility into reality. We have seen that change is possible. We see it in the more families and friends, coworkers and classmates who welcome an LGBTQ loved one with broad smiles and with open hearts. We see it in a movement going from Stonewall to the steps of the Supreme Court and bringing marriage equality to every state in this land. I see it as someone who just 5 years ago couldn't bring myself to say the words "I'm transgender" to my mirror, when I stand on stage at the Democratic National Convention and declare before the nation that I am a proud transgender American. But of course, we have not come this far to stop now. Not with so much work left to do, not with so many attacks facing so many in this community. After all, the fundamental truth remains in my work that no one in the LGBTQ community, in any community, is totally equal until everyone, from the gay Muslim refugee to the queer undocumented immigrant to the transgender woman of color living right here in Wilmington, Delaware, until every single one of us is treated with dignity and fairness. But I believe that day will come. And when it does, years from now, when our understanding of we the people finally includes all of us, a young gay student or a young trans student will grow up and learn about the struggle for justice and equality in their textbooks and never have to know what this progress felt like to all of us who are LGBTQ, because they will never know anything different. And that will be because of LGBTQ people who marched and fought for a better tomorrow. It'll be because of allies who stood up and spoke out. It'll be because of this generation of Americans who wrote our chapter in the history books. So thank you all very much for having me here. I'd love to answer any questions.
I'm just going to grab a microphone so if people have questions, they can say them into that. I'm relying on my Rotary responsibilities here, my Rotary training here. Who's got questions?
Any questions? Seriously.
It's a room full of Jews and nobody has anything to say. My God. So,
This is more of a request.
swap that one
I'll
out.
speak really loud.
There you go.
I can do that. So I saw a number of people trolling you this week as you gave us the really awesome news about your book. There was a bunch of people trolling you, and you had some very eloquent words to share as to why those trolls don't get you down. And I would really love it if you could share some of that courage with some of us here who may be dealing with other kinds of discrimination.
That's a wonderful question. So obviously in my work, I get a lot of pushback. I face a lot of online harassment and online bullying. And for a while, it really bothered me. I took this is absurd, a selfie of myself in a bathroom in North Carolina after the state had passed the law known as HB2, banning transgender people from accessing restrooms consistent with our gender identity. I have a lot to say about that, but I will not say it right now. So I took a picture of myself, and I posted it online, and it went viral. It got shared about 60,000 times. 100,000 people liked it, millions saw it. It was on the news, it was on MSNBC, it was everywhere. And while a lot of the comments were really positive, more and more I started getting really hateful comments. I was flying to Colorado to speak at an HRC event, and my phone was just lighting up with message after message. Kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself. You're disgusting, you're a freak. Kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself. And it obviously really got to me. I remember I was the next day sitting in my hotel room, and I just wanted it to end. I thought about, should I just delete the post? And I was like, no, they'll win. If I delete the post, they will win. But I also wanted everything to end. And for a brief second, the only time in my life, the thought of suicide became a rational thought. And I knew that in 2 or 3 days that was going to pass, the news cycle would change, and my selfie in a bathroom would no longer be on anyone's mind. But even in that moment, I was so consumed by what people were saying, I started to internalize it. And I thought about all the LGBTQ young people who go to school every day, for whom that reality that I had for those 3 days temporarily was a reality every single day. And after it, I started worrying. I was like, can I do this work anymore? This is affecting me too much. And so I did a lot of research. I listened to all these podcasts about people facing harassment. And I found this one, I think it was This American Life podcast, with a journalist who self-identifies as a proud fat woman. And she writes all of these articles about her weight, and she got the most horrendous pushback. And she met one-on-one with one of the people who trolled her, this person who actually created a fake Twitter account as her deceased father to say, I'm ashamed of you, you're disgusting, right? I mean, just despicable, despicable harassment. And they had a conversation. And, you know, of course, part of it is behind the keyboard, no one seems real, and so it's easier to bully people. But then they started talking more and more about his sort of why he was so angry at this person. And I think it's sort of trite to say that the biggest bullies are oftentimes the biggest closet cases, right? Like, oftentimes people try to assert that they're not LGBTQ by bullying people who are LGBTQ, and that's true to some degree, but it can't be universalized, right? There's too many bullies and not enough closeted LGBTQ people for that to make sense. And so after I did this research, it finally just sort of struck me that everyone deals with an insecurity. Everyone deals with something that society tells them they should be ashamed of, whether it's your sexual orientation, your gender identity, whether it's how you look, what you do, where you come from. Everyone has some insecurity that they have a difficult time overcoming. And for me, what sort of at some point just clicked and allowed me to stop feeling these messages, these comments so deeply, was that I realized that I had taken an insecurity, something that society had told me I should be ashamed of, and I conquered that insecurity. I'm living my truth without shame anymore. And the bullies, they see that power. They see that agency that I've exercised in telling society that I don't care whether they think who I am is wrong, that I'm going to live my life, and they're jealous of that power. They're jealous of that agency. And so for me, I think realizing that this bullying doesn't come from a place of weakness for me, but actually originates from my place of power, helped me to sort of stop caring about what they have to say. And I actually recorded a message right after the election to LGBTQ youth everywhere that we released on HRC's Facebook, because we were getting reports of suicides in the days after the election. People realizing that the bullies in their schools were emboldened. And so I wanted to share that lesson with them that I had learned, and it's what helped me get through the work. That was a long answer, sorry.
Right. While we're passing this around, just something I meant to say earlier, and just a quick announcement. We live stream all of our services, and we're live streaming right now, so everybody can wave hi to the camera. And if you're concerned, if you know that there were people who weren't able to make it this evening, and they were concerned about not being able to hear Sarah's words and this Q&A, this is all being picked up, so you can go to our YouTube channel and you can pick it up there. Sonia, and then Harriet Ann, and then Sheila.
I don't know whether you all heard that, but Sarah has just written a book. It's really pretty awesome, and I think if you might tell people just a couple words about it when it's coming out, because I think it's a book with a lesson that all of us need to know, wherever we are.
Thank you. So actually on Wednesday, we just announced that my book's coming out in March of 2018. I spent 6 months writing this book with an editor. It's called Tomorrow Will Be Different, Love, Loss, and the Fight for Trans Equality. I'm really excited to say that Joe Biden wrote the foreword for the book. So it's available for pre-order on a number of different places, but you can go to sarahmcbride.com, and it's available pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and other places through the website. And it's a mix of my own story, so sort of the story I shared with you in a lot more detail, a book's worth of detail, and also the issues that we face as a trans community and the broader LGBTQ community and our movement, and what we still need to be treated with dignity and fairness. So I hope you will consider looking it up and purchasing it. Like I said, pre-order is available now.
Hi. Is this working? Okay. One of our sons is a teacher, and he's been in situations where he's aware of a child who, well, even a high school student actually, who is transgender, but the family is not, let's say, as open-minded as yours apparently was. And so what is it that we as a community can do for people who are still in the family with their parents pretty much all the time, who are in that situation but are not being allowed to live their authentic selves?
That's a great question. I mean, what I would say is to affirm that child, no matter what, to affirm that young person, no matter what, regardless of how they present or are allowed to present, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of where their parents are, to affirm who that child says they are, and who that child is. And so making sure that you're respecting pronouns, respecting names, regardless of how that child or the young person is able to present, making sure you're respecting that identity. And then I think if you have a relationship with the parents, working through with the parents, in this case that might not be the case, but working through with the parents to try to get them to a place where they can love and accept and embrace their child, whether that's sending them resources, whether that's just talking to them and saying, I know you might be scared, I know you might not understand this, but at the end of the day, and this is what I hear time and time again from parents of trans youth, would you rather have a dead child or a transgender child? Because we know that when it comes to transgender people, 41% attempt suicide at some point in their life. 41%. That is 10 times higher than the high rates of suicide among veterans. 41%. Nearly half of transgender people try to end their lives because society is so hateful. But we also know that that number drops in half if the child has supportive parents. And it drops even further if they have a supportive community. And so this isn't a question of politics. It's not even a question of religion. It's a question of whether you want your child to live. And the stakes could not be higher. And so whether all you can do is affirm that child, give that child the knowledge that there is someone in this world who sees them and who affirms them, or whether you could go further and talk to the parents or work with the parents, you need to do something because that child's life might be at risk. I think for my parents, when I came out, it sort of felt like I was dying to them. That's what they said. This child that they had known for so long, who they had dreams and hopes for, this child who looked one way and was going to look a different way, it felt like they were losing their child. But I think it's important to always tell those parents that the child might look a little different. And your dreams for that child may change a little bit, but they will always be the same person with the same laugh, the same smile, and the same hopes and dreams. And if you want that child to be around, then the only step you can take is to see that child for who they are and affirm that child for who they are. Yes?
I'll follow up to your statement just now. What would happen if those parents said, we want our child dead? And what steps would you take at that point to protect that child? And what steps would need to happen to protect that child?
Well, it depends on the community, and it depends on society, and it depends on the circumstance that child finds themselves in. So often, governments aren't in a place where they're willing to acknowledge that to deny a child their identity, to risk that child's mental health and therefore their physical health. A lot of governments aren't in a place to call that what it is, which is child abuse. So it depends. The sort of resources and the routes that a community can take differ. And there's no one-size-fits-all answer. But all I can say is exactly what I said to her question, which is if you find yourself as a friend or neighbor or coworker in that situation, don't remain silent. It's not their business and not for you to say. It is for you to stand up. If you saw that parent hitting their child, you'd say something. If you saw that parent berating their child with insults and hate, you would say something. And this is the same situation. You need to say something. You need to speak out. And my dad always says, if everyone has a little bit of courage, then no one needs to be a hero. And so if you just have that little bit of courage and you model that behavior to them, sometimes people, when they're responding to a situation, they're responding the way that they think society or their community expects them to respond. And if you model a different behavior, that can have a life-changing and life-saving consequence. For me, if my parents hadn't embraced me, I don't know that the broader community would have embraced me in the same way. I mean, there would certainly have been people who embraced me, but everyone who's embraced me, everyone who's affirmed me, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. When I came out, my parents said, we don't get this, we don't understand, this is frightening, we don't want this to happen, but everyone is going to look to us, and we need to make sure that we model that behavior. And if the parents aren't doing it, then the friends, the neighbors, the coworkers have to do it.
I heard this week someone speak on the Supreme Court case that's coming up about this baker who will bake a cake for a gay couple,
yes,
but would not put two men on top of it because it was against his religious beliefs. And today I heard that Trump said that companies don't have to pay for birth control if it's against their religious beliefs. And supposedly religious beliefs trumps discrimination, I guess. How does that tie in with discrimination against trans people? Or
yeah, that's a great question. One of the most common anti-LGBTQ bills that we're seeing, I mentioned 130 anti-LGBTQ bills in 2017. One of the most common are these so-called Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, super RFRAs is what we're calling them, which are really nothing more than license to discriminate bills. Bills that grant people this sweeping exemption from laws to discriminate in the name of their religion. In 1990, I'm forgetting the year, but in the 1990s, there was a case before the Supreme Court Smith v. Employment Division. And actually, Antonin Scalia wrote the decision in that case, and he said, if we allow everyone to exempt themselves from laws based on what may be a sincerely held religious belief, then every man becomes a nation unto themselves. Our laws only mean something if we ensure that they are enforced. And Colorado, in the Masterpiece case, the one about the baker, made a decision that they would ban discrimination in public accommodations, businesses that serve the public, based on sexual orientation and gender identity. They made a decision that they would ban that form of discrimination. And when you open a for-profit business, when you open any business, you agree to abide by the rules of the market. And one of the most fundamental rules in our markets over the last 50 years is that when you open your doors to the public, you have to serve the public, without regard for race, gender, and increasingly gender identity or sexual orientation. And so if you open your doors to the public, you have to serve the public equally. That's what Colorado's legislature proclaimed. That's what their state Supreme Court has agreed with. But now the Supreme Court is hearing this case that would grant this religious exemption. Religious freedom is a core American value. It is called the first freedom for a reason. But religious freedom has always been a shield against government persecution, not a sword to inflict harm on other people. It should never be, and has never been, an excuse to discriminate. Only recently has it been corrupted by anti-equality activists for their own personal political agenda. And so the Supreme Court's going to hear this case, and it's going to decide whether businesses, for-profit businesses, have an individual right as a person to invoke an individual in that company's religious beliefs to discriminate against someone. That could have sweeping consequences, not just for LGBTQ people, but for religious minorities, for women in this country, for people with disabilities. And I don't want to hear an administration that calls neo-Nazis fine people, that bans people from majority Muslim nations, talk about religious freedom. They do not care about religious freedom. If you are persecuting religious minorities, you are not upholding religious freedom. And that's exactly what these license to discriminate laws, the guidance by the Department of Justice in this case, deal with.
We got time for, say, one more, and we'll do two more because my temple president's putting her hand up, so I'm not going to say no to her. So, yeah, it is. Just don't swallow it.
Do you or would you go into the inner city Wilmington elementary schools yourself and a child, a transgender child, to educate the young kids at their formative stages in the elementary school?
Like would I personally? I mean, I certainly am willing to go anywhere to talk to anyone. The Human Rights Campaign, not specifically in Wilmington, no. But the Human Rights Campaign actually has a program called Welcoming Schools, which is a program that actually goes into elementary schools to ensure that the schools are inclusive of not just LGBTQ people, but young women, to make sure that the schools are combating gender stereotype and gender bias. Because at the end of the day, anti-LGBTQ discrimination is actually based in misogyny and sexism. That's what homophobia and transphobia is at its core. And so we have this program, Welcoming Schools, that goes into elementary schools and does simple things like saying, teachers don't separate children by gender when they're going to the restroom. If you have books, include age-appropriate books that reflect the full diversity of humanity. There's nothing objectionable about my identity. There's nothing objectionable about a gay person. And the hate that we see in the world, it is learned. It is learned. And it is important for us at an early age to make clear that hate is never right and that all people of all ages must affirm and respect everyone else. And that includes in elementary schools. So I'd certainly be willing to do it. We have a program that actually does that right now, giving teachers and staff techniques and methods to make sure that their classrooms are inclusive. I mean, we're not talking about going into detail that's going to not make sense to someone who just is not an age to comprehend things, but we are talking about making sure that the classrooms are safe, that there's no bullying, and that that transgender 5-year-old or 7-year-old or 8-year-old can see themselves in the curriculum, can see themselves in the books that they're reading about, or the books they're reading.
Just a note on that, we're starting to see in the Jewish community, we're starting to see more and more educational materials on that as well. And if you go to Keshet, the website, which is a Jewish advocacy for LGBT, the Religious Action Center's website, rac.org, and I would also include PJ Library, which I know a lot of our kids and grandkids are getting, right, free Jewish books. More and more of those books are LGBTQ inclusive. So these are books that these kids are getting, these parents are getting delivered to their doors. So it's not Stubbs or Warner, but we are seeing more and more resources out there. And I said we were going to have one more question. We're going to have two more questions because I'm not going to say no to Deb Heffernan either. So hang on one second.
You had touched on it a little bit in your answer to Harriet Ann about pronouns. Can you share with our group how important it is to ask about them and to use them appropriately?
Yeah. So there's a lot of conversations around pronouns. It's amazing. A lot of people don't know what pronouns are. She, her, hers, he, him, his. Increasingly, more and more people are using gender-neutral pronouns, including they, them, theirs. And what I would say is, in terms of individuals in society, pronouns and names are the most frequent way as a society we interact with a person's gender or acknowledge a person's gender. And so if time and time again people are using the wrong pronouns talking to you or talking about you, they are making a very clear declaration that they do not see you. And that homesickness that I talked about for me, if someone says to me they don't see me, that homesickness comes back. And it causes real pain. And nothing in this world, I think everyone in this world, they want nothing more than to be seen in their personhood and in their dignity. I think that's the theme of every marginalized movement throughout history, and it's certainly the theme, I think, of everyone's life. And so pronouns are an incredibly important way for us as a society to acknowledge a transgender person's gender identity and that we see them and affirm them and respect them. And I know sometimes it requires people to be intentional about what they're saying, but when it comes to respecting humanity, if intentionality is what is called for, then we need intentionality. We need people. It might be a little inconvenience for you, but it is a huge indignity for me. And so it's incredibly important for people to affirm. And increasingly with gender-neutral pronouns, particularly they, them, theirs, one of the things we hear from people is, well, that's not grammatically correct. First off, grammar isn't more important than human dignity. 2, grammar is made by man, and that means we can change it, right? And they, them, theirs actually was a singular pronoun centuries ago before it became exclusively a plural pronoun. And if that's the case, we can return to it. So respecting people for who they are is what this is all about. Pronouns are the most common way we affirm people.
I just wanted to comment that right now in our state, though we do have non-discrimination for gender identity, one thing it didn't, which maybe we did this wrong, but it didn't go for schools. And right now, I wondered if you could comment, and we're working on, the Department of Education is working on regulations right now for schools to be able to make sure that every single student for anything, sexual orientation, non-discrimination, gender identity, that there is no non-discrimination, and we're working on that right now. But I would really like that when these regs come out, there's a lot that we could have lots and lots of people comment about how important it is. And at one of the task force, there were some public meetings, and my youngest daughter, who you guys know very well, but she's 19, but it's not the kids that are having the issues, it's us grown-ups. Yeah. And my husband says don't say grown-ups because it's saying adults. That's like a kid thing to say, but that's how I think about it. But we had this is what my daughter Charlotte said. Didn't we go through this already where everybody couldn't go to the same bathroom? And can't we get over it now in this day and age? So I'd like you to comment on that, and I would love to keep the congregation apprised when it's time to submit comments.
That's a great question, and I mentioned that Representative Heffernan has been a leader on that issue among many others. And so right now the Department of Education in Delaware has established this task force with community members to issue regulations regarding the respectful and fair treatment of students, like you said, not just based on gender identity and expression, but also race, religion, sexual orientation, among other protected categories. And it's important to note that we're not just talking about bathrooms here. We're talking about everything. We're talking about whether the child is fully protected from bullying in the school, whether that takes it seriously. It's about whether a child or a student is able to participate in extracurricular activities as themselves, about whether kids are called the right pronouns in schools, right, the right names. So this is about whether we in Delaware are ensuring that every student has equal access to a safe and quality education, which is a fundamental right here, or at least it should be in our values. And my impression is that a draft regulation is out and people can submit comments on the Department of Education's website through October 9th. I believe that's right. And so I implore folks, if they want to do something over the weekend, to find the website to submit those comments. I don't have it with me right now. And submit a comment in support of the draft regulations. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be super detailed. Just affirming that you believe this is the right thing for Delaware to do, for the Department of Education to do, because you believe that every student deserves to have equal access to a safe and quality education. And let me just speak to bathrooms, because I haven't talked about it in too much detail, and I don't want to spend too much time, because I think this is the last question. But, we have this national conversation around bathrooms right now, and I think people don't quite understand why we're talking about bathrooms and why it's so important. So why we're talking about bathrooms is basically because after gay people no longer were the effective political boogeyman for the right, or at least have become less and less effective as political tools, the right wing has now adjusted to attacking trans people as their sort of hate of the year method. And the most frequent attack we see are these efforts, like in North Carolina, to ban transgender people from accessing restrooms consistent with their gender identity. And we're seeing this for two reasons. One, every civil rights battle throughout history has talked about bathrooms, right? Bathrooms were at the center of the conversation around the Civil Rights Act. Bathrooms were at the center of the conversation around the Equal Rights Act. Bathrooms were at the center of the conversation around the Americans with Disabilities Act. And now bathrooms, again, are at the center of this conversation on transgender rights. And the reason for that is twofold. One is that bathrooms, everyone feels a little vulnerable and weird in a bathroom, right? So it's fertile ground for people to stoke fears. Because if you're already a little uncomfortable and you throw in this idea that might be new to you, you're much more willing to shut down and say, no, that's too much. So we know bathrooms are just fertile grounds in every movement for civil rights for opponents to stoke fears. But the second reason, and frankly the more insidious reason, is that access to bathrooms is a necessary requirement to fully and equally participate in public life. Because if you cannot use a bathroom that makes sense for you, if you cannot have access to a restroom, it becomes much more difficult to go to school. Becomes much more difficult to go to work, becomes much more difficult to leave your house for more than 2 hours. And if you can't leave your house for more than 2 hours, you can't have a job, and then you can't actually have a house. These are, without question, efforts to legislate transgender people out of public life. These are, without question, the closest thing to a silver bullet to remove transgender people from this country, from existence. And while bathrooms may seem frivolous in the moment, at the end of the day, this is about whether we see transgender people for who they are, respect their dignity, and allow them to participate in public life just like everyone else. Because if we don't, then none of the other aspects of equality matter. Thank you all very much. Wonderful conversation.
Thank you again, Sarah, for speaking tonight, for answering our questions. Before we walk out of here, just a reminder that everything's up on YouTube, so if you want to come back and watch it again or push it to people, feel free to do so. We're going to make a quick hamotzi. There are refreshments waiting for us outside in our social hall. If you're a guest in the congregation, thank you for joining us. Hope to see you again soon. Regardless of whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, it's always a joy to be able to celebrate with all of you. Let's join together in hamotzi. We'll have a chance to have a few refreshments. You want to ask more questions, you can do that at that point. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat shalom. Good to see you. Hope to see you again soon.